Turkish Germans by Beth, Dakota, Maddie, Delpha, Emily, Jessica, and Kylie. Some demographics on Turkish Germans. Migration from Turkey to Germany did not start until the early 1960s. Many Turks went to work in Germany due to a labor shortage. Today, Turks form the largest minority group in Germany, with almost 2 million Turkish citizens, not including citizens of Turkish descent. Turks living in Germany maintain and strongly embrace their Turkish identity and are not affected by German cultural norms, and are mainly social networking with other Turkish people living in Germany. Although younger Turks are generally more familiar with German culture, they are still less educated and hold a lower occupational status than their German counterparts. Many German Turks opt out of German citizenship because they feel like they are cultural outsiders. Moving on to Turkish-German education, many Turks have limited exposure to German prior to schooling, giving them a disadvantage and more difficulty finishing school. In Germany, 10 years of education is the minimum. However, until recently, only 5 years was mandatory in Turkey, but has recently been extended to 11 years, thus showing that Turkish Germans have a lower educational status than Germans. Now moving on to employment, income, and living status. Many Turkish Germans are working unskilled jobs with a lower average household income than many Germans. Many Turkish Germans are living in urban and former industrial areas of Germany. Within a married household, there is on average 3 children, with an average of 61.9% of Turkish Germans being married. With a statistic of 50 to 75% of Turkish men living in Germany marry a woman who grew up in Turkey. Within Turkish German households, many Turkish Germans are practicing Islamic religion. Many Turkish Germans hold a high value on close, lasting family relationships.
Family structure and parent-child contact varies considerably among native Germans and Turkish immigrants living in Germany. One reason for this is that native Germans favor a much more individualistic way of living, and this is evident in their family structure as there is more emphasis placed on nuclear family living, they have higher divorce rates, higher occurrences of stepfamilies, and less contact among parents and their adult children once the children leave home to live on their own. Turkish immigrants, on the other hand, have traditionally lived more collectively compared to their native German counterparts. Family is the cornerstone of Turkish culture. This value affects the way they structure their families. Turkish immigrants highly value their connections to their extended family members, as is evident in the remittances that were sent back to their family members living in Turkey during the first waves of migration to Germany in the 1950s and 60s. Additionally, divorce rates among Turks is virtually unheard of, as this would go against their core value of familial cohesion and doing what is best for the group, and because of this, Turks tend to successfully maintain the structural integrity of their nuclear families. Turkish immigrant children don't tend to leave home to live on their own until around age 25, which is older than the average age of 22 that is normally found among native German children. Once children do move out, one study found that German parents saw their children only a few times per month, while Turkish immigrant parents saw their child at least weekly. Turkish immigrants are also highly focused on academic success and expect their sons in particular to excel in school because it is expected that the son will take care of his parents one day when they are too old to care for themselves. Though there are 2 competing cultural ideals within Germany found both in native Germans and Turkish immigrant families, Turkish immigrants have found it important to stick to their more community-centered values, especially when it comes to their family structure. As subsequent generations arise, though, that pattern is beginning to change as new Turkish immigrant parents are starting to embrace more mainstream German individualistic ways of parenting with their children. This may have a major impact on family structure in future generations among Turkish immigrants living in Germany.
In the article Female Breadwinner Families in Germany, New Gender Roles, it mentions that in Western Germany, a strong male breadwinner model represented the norm and normality for decades, which means that traditionally the gender role for parenting is that the father earns the money and the mother stays at home with the children. And in Germany, mothers are entitled to 14 weeks of paid maternity leave, and 6 of those weeks are before the due date and 8 weeks are after the delivery. This maternity leave benefit is only paid to the mothers and it cannot be transferred to the fathers, which means that this could be a reason why mothers end up staying home with the children rather than the fathers. The female breadwinner is becoming more normalized in Germany, and 70% of mothers are now working, but 40% are working only part-time, which means that they want to spend half of the day with their children. So parents are trying to get the children to be more independent and to teach self-reliance. Gender issues when it comes to parenting has to do mostly with who's working and who's taking care of the children at home. So a German mother is statistically more likely to stay at home and forfeit her career than a German father. And the article, The Female Breadwinner Families in Germany, New Gender Roles, mentions that men tend to contribute less to domestic tasks than their female partners, even if the latter are the breadwinners. And this article mentions that this illustrates how men create gender consistent with masculine norms that prescribe breadwinning exemption from housework. So in this article, a few female breadwinners were interviewed and they reported that their higher income hardly affected the balance of power in the family and let alone change it in the mother's favor. So this article also mentioned that ambivalences and ambiguities of gender concepts have been influenced by contradictory political measures in Germany since unification of East and West. For example, on one hand, the tax system provides negative incentives for women's labor market participation. On the other hand, access to childcare facilities have been steadily expanded in Western Germany, especially over the past decades. So in that article, I read that lately women have been more qualified and have more qualifications than more qualification and achievements compared to their husbands, but yet they are the ones staying at home and their husbands are the ones going to work because like I mentioned, German mothers are less likely to forfeit their career when compared to the fathers.
In a particular study, participants were chosen from Bavaria in Germany. It is recommended that mothers breastfeed at least until 6 months. But according to this study, only 21.4% of women exclusively breastfeed until the infant is 6 months old, whereas 41.7% of women exclusively breastfeed until their child is 4 months old. So, as you can see, not many women in Germany breastfeed past 6 months. In Germany, other fluids such as tea, water, formula, and glucose fluid, which is most popular, are introduced. The introduction of these fluids are used as a particular form of weaning and are introduced at a mean age of 5 months. But 72.3% of parents aren't giving their child liquids until 6 months. Although cow's milk is not recommended by experts until after the infant is 1 year old, it is found that 85% of mothers give their infants milk after 9 months. Mothers in Germany, about 30.8% in fact, feed their infant their first meal, or Beikost as they call it, at 6 months. Only 16% feed the infant Beikost at 5 months. The infant's introduction to solid and semi-solid foods includes mashed veggies, potatoes, meat, and 2 things called cereal milk porridge and cereal fruit porridge. The common order of introducing these foods is breast milk or formula, liquids, veggies, meat, cereal milk porridge, and cereal fruit porridge. Finally, there are a few signs that parents in Germany look for to know if their child is ready to eat solid foods. These signs include if the baby is trying to put objects in his or her mouth. Second is if the baby finds interest in what the adults are eating. Third is if you attempt to give your baby a spoonful of food, they shouldn't be pushing it away. Last is that the baby is ready to eat if he or she can sit on her own and can support the weight of their head.
In Germany, Turkish immigrants, aka German Turks, and ethnic Germans often have different experiences and thoughts on fertility, reproduction, and children. Through the lens of both German Turks and German struggles with infertility, we recognize what all of these mean to each group.
While both Germans and German Turks endured intense personal loss and social stigma due to their involuntary childless life, those of Turkish descent reported greater frustration, grief, anxiety, and suffering as a result of the inability to conceive. While both Germans and German Turks expressed a desire for children, German Turks more frequently indicated a need for children. Couples of Turkish descent tended to say a child would give their lives greater purpose, that a baby would improve their social status, and that married couples needed to have children to fulfill societal role expectations. A German Turkish woman states, "We Turks love children. They are the center of our world. They are life's happiness. Once you have children, you are finally a woman." On the other hand, German couples prioritize interpersonal reasons for having children. They described pregnancy and children as an enduring representation of their relationship and love. Additionally, while a child-free life is not ideal in the eyes of many Germans, it is viewed as a legitimate lifestyle option in German society. Overall, while children are important to ethnic Germans, the sole identity of German adulthood is not wrapped up in kinship roles. In contrast, the need for those of Turkish descent to have children is so strong that voluntary childless is virtually non-existent. Many couples declared their marriage would not be fully acknowledged until they had children. The passage into adulthood is also marked by producing children. Further, given the strong connection between family and identity, childlessness correlates with loss in social status. A German Turkish man stated, "The Germans don't desire children as much as Turks do. We need children in our lives to be happy. We always want our children near us. Our children are the future for us, since they will take care of us when we are old. They will give us grandchildren to make us laugh. That is why infertility is more difficult for Turks than for Germans." Through the accounts of German Turks and other ethnic Germans' experiences with infertility, we see a clear distinction between the significance of children and family to the two ethnic groups. I hope this information was able to give you insight into German Turkish immigrants' beliefs on reproduction, children, and family.
Socialization is the process through which individuals learn the habits, values, and knowledge of a particular society and act in ways that are approved by members of that society. Parents' efforts to socialize their children often differ between cultural groups. Understanding the motivations underlying particular socialization goals in the context of specific cultures has important implications in regard to children's outcomes. On measures of cognitive abilities and school achievement, children belonging to majority groups tend to perform better than immigrant children living in the same society. Cross-cultural differences in socialization values and norms are clearly rooted in the broader collectivist, individualist leanings of different cultures. While Turkish culture often emphasizes the more collectivist ideals of obedience, interdependence, and social ties, the individualistic nature of German society tends to endorse the concepts of autonomy, independence, assertiveness, and self-control. Second-generation Turkish immigrant mothers tend to encourage displays of autonomy and assertiveness in their children more so than first-generation mothers. Certain characteristics, such as maintaining close ties with family and friends, remain important to Turkish immigrant mothers regardless of their generational status. Traditionally, socialization goals within the Turkish cultural context stresses the importance of having and displaying respect for authority figures and elders. The majority of Turkish mothers perceive that it is not tolerable for a child to interrupt an adult conversation for any reason. In terms of discipline techniques, Turkish immigrant mothers tend to use physical and authoritarian discipline techniques more often than non-immigrant mothers in German society. Young children, however, are typically treated with indulgence in that they are not expected to follow rules. Even misbehavior is met with great tolerance. Indulgence is generally limited to the first 5 to 7 years and is likely to be gradually replaced by a parenting style that is much more demanding and strict, wherein children are expected to help their younger siblings and elders. Children are also expected to be respectful and obedient, especially toward their father. In addition, Turkish culture values close, long-lasting family relationships. These intergenerational emotional ties are in turn frequently associated with attention to familial duties and obligations. Turkish migrant mothers in Germany refer to the early implementation of cultural-specific hospitality rituals, such as encouraging children to kiss an adult's hand in greeting. Child-rearing practices that stimulate children's cognitive development, such as shared book reading, are displayed less frequently by Turkish immigrant mothers than mainstream German mothers.